In this video, I'm going to be addressing two separate grammar concepts. First, I will talk about direct object pronouns, which you learned about in lesson 5.4, and then we'll move into indirect object pronouns, which are coming to you from grammar lesson 6.2. To start out, let's review what direct object pronouns are. We'll talk a little bit about when and how they're used, and also what the actual pronouns themselves are. A direct object means that an action is happening to or at someone or something. So the action is directly received, and that's why it's called a direct object pronoun. In this sentence, yo leo, it's simply saying I read. It's not super specific, but if I add a couple of words to it, yo leo un libro, I read a book, now we're getting a little bit more specific. And un libro, a book, is actually my direct object. Okay, so I can substitute that direct object, which right now is a noun, a book, I can substitute that for a direct object pronoun to say I read it. Okay, the way we need to do this is first you're going to change un libro to lo, because libro happens to be masculine. And then you also have to rearrange your sentence a little bit. So you put the word lo in front of your conjugated verb leo. So your whole sentence to say I read it would be yo lo leo. Let's try another example where our direct object is a person instead of a thing. I could say a very broad sentence, ella visita, she visits. If I want to get a little bit more specific about who she visits, I could say ella visita a su novio, she visits her boyfriend. If I wanted to change that, instead of saying she visits her boyfriend, if I just want to say she visits him, then I can change a su novio to lo, rearrange my sentence and put it before the conjugated verb, so then I have ella lo visita. She visits him. Here are the other direct object pronouns that we use in Spanish. So if I want to say something is happening to me, I use me. If it's happening to us, I use nos. If it's happening to you and you happen to be one person that I know on a familiar or friendly basis, then I would use te. If it's happening to you and you happen to be a group of people and you're in Spain, so this is like the y'all of Spanish, then I would use os. And then when we get into the third person, to say him, it, or you, when you is referring to usted, we use lo. And that would be if usted was a male. If usted happened to be a female, then we would use the same form as her or it, which would be la. And then with the plural, we would use los or las for them or you. When you is referring to a group of males, it's los. When you refers to a group of females, it's las. A couple of reminders about direct object pronouns. When you have a conjugated verb, the direct object will go directly before that conjugated verb, even when you use the word no to show that something is not happening. For example, if I want to say, Gabriela tiene las llaves, so Gabriela has the keys, or she doesn't have the keys, then either way, to change the keys to them, it's going to go before your conjugated verb. So Gabriela las tiene. Gabriela has them. Or Gabriela no las tiene. Gabriela doesn't have them. When you have an infinitive verb, so remember that's a verb that ends in either AR, ER, or IR, or a gerund. Remember a gerund is the equivalent to the English ING. So those are verbs that end in ando or yendo. You can put the direct object on the end of the infinitive verb or the gerund, or you can put it before your conjugated verb like you would in a normal sentence. So either way would be correct. If you want to say Carlos is going to buy it, or Carlos is buying it, here are two ways you could say that. Carlos va a comprarlo, or you could also say Carlos lo va a comprar. To say Carlos is buying it, Carlos está comprándolo, or Carlos lo está comprando, and either one would be acceptable. You might notice there's an accent over the letter A in the gerund comprando, and this is something that we do when we tack on extra direct objects or indirect objects to the end of the gerund, and this is simply to maintain your pronunciation and make sure you're emphasizing the correct syllable. So you would say Carlos está comprándolo instead of Carlos está comprándolo or Carlos está comprándolo. This kind of tells you keep that emphasis on the Okay, let's move on to indirect object pronouns. An indirect object tells us to whom or for whom an action is done. So that person might indirectly be receiving the action, but it's not done exactly it's not done exactly to that person. There's usually another entity involved. The good thing about indirect object pronouns is that in the first and second, first person, second person, singular and plural forms, they look exactly like the direct object pronouns. So that should be easy for you to remember. The only difference is that when you use me, this means now that it's being done to or for me. Nos now is going to mean that it's being done to or for us. So then when you get to your third person singular and plural forms, you don't have to differentiate whether they're male or female any longer. You use le if it's singular or les if it's plural. So le can mean that something is being done to or for him, her, or you if the you is usted. Les means that it's being done to or for them or you if you is ustedes. Couple of reminders about indirect object pronouns. These two rules should look familiar to you. We just talked about these with the direct object pronoun. So the exact same rule applies with indirect object pronouns. You can write this down, or you don't have to write it down if you don't want to, since you already have it in your notes. But I am going to show you a couple of examples. So if I want to say he buys a gift for me, or he buys me a gift, I can say él me compra un regalo. If I want to say he doesn't buy a gift for me, or he doesn't buy me a gift, él no me compra un regalo. You'll notice the me goes before the conjugated verb, just like it did when we were using direct object pronouns. And then same with the gerunds and infinitive verbs. It can tack on to the end, or it doesn't have to. So here are a couple of examples of those. To say he doesn't pay you, or I'm sorry, he doesn't want to pay you, you can say él no quiere pagarte or él no te quiere pagar. Either one is fine. To say she is writing us a letter, or she's writing a letter to us, you could say ella está escribiéndonos una carta or ella nos está escribiendo una carta. Either one is acceptable. And again, you'll notice we put that accent on the gerund to help maintain the correct pronunciation. Another thing that's important to know about indirect object pronouns is that because in the third person form, when we use le or les, that can mean so many different things. You'll usually hear native Spanish speakers clarify to whom the action is being done or for whom it's being done. And you can do this by using the word a and then the person's name. Or sometimes it might not be a name, it might be a title. Here's an example. I could say, yo le doy un regalo a mi amiga. Or yo les digo un secreto a ellos. So in these sentences, the le is representing my friend, mi amiga. The les is representing them, ellos. So the a mi amiga and the a ellos is not required if you already know that I'm talking about giving something to my friend or telling a secret to them. But if you're not sure who I'm giving the gift to or who I'm telling the secret to, then it's a good idea to include that clarification. Okay, here's the last rule, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated, so don't panic if this is confusing to you. We will practice it quite a bit in class. But when you're using a direct object and an indirect object in the same sentence, you will put the indirect object first. Here's a couple of examples. If I want to say, she reads it to me, so it is referring to a book, then I would say, ella me lo lee. I used lo because book is singular and masculine. Okay, and I've color coded here so you can clearly see which word is the direct object and which word is the indirect object. Here's another example. We give it to you, and it happens to be a present, un regalo, and you happen to be my best friend or someone I know on a first name basis. Nosotros te lo damos. Okay, so go ahead and write those examples in your notes, but then we'll talk about it more in class and go over a few more examples together. Hope that helps you understand a little bit or kind of start to get a feel for how direct object and indirect object pronouns work.